Snow was falling softly on Christmas Eve when a scream ripped through the night, sharp, desperate, and far too small to belong to anyone but a child. 7-year-old Lily hit the frozen ground as the belt came down again, her stepmother's shadow towering over her in the snow. "Get up!" Rebecca snarled. "I'm not done with you!" But then another sound cut through the storm, heavy boots crunching over ice, a low growl from a German shepherd, and a voice, calm, lethal, trained to command battlefields. "Step away from the child," the Marine said. "Right now." Rebecca turned, and the color drained from her face. Because this wasn't a neighbor. This wasn't a passerby. It was the one man her dead husband trusted above everyone else. And he had come to collect a promise. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, hit subscribe so you never miss another tale of courage, faith, and miracles. A bitter Christmas Eve snowfall drifted across the quiet suburban street, the icy wind carrying the hum of distant church bells. The lights along the houses glowed gold and red, shimmering through curtains of white, turning the neighborhood into a picture-perfect postcard of holiday peace. But beneath that softness, hidden under the warmth of twinkling lights and wreaths on front doors, danger festered silently in one home where Christmas had long ceased to mean comfort or love. In the backyard of the gray 2-story house at the end of the block, a 7-year-old girl named Lily Martinez knelt in the snow wearing only a thin, faded Christmas pajama shirt printed with tiny reindeer. Her petite frame shivered uncontrollably, breath fogging in sharp bursts, chestnut brown hair plastered messily across her cheeks. Her skin was pale from cold, her lips tinged blue, and her small shoulders curled inward like a child trying to disappear. She cried without sound at first, the kind of tears that come from long familiarity with fear. But when the leather belt cracked through the air for the 4th time, a sharp, involuntary scream tore from her throat. Standing over her was Rebecca Carter, her stepmother, a woman in her late 30s with a tall, angular build, blonde hair tied into a harsh bun, and a face that somehow always looked dissatisfied. Her thin lips were pressed so tight they nearly vanished, and her icy blue eyes held a frustration that had very little to do with the child in front of her. Rebecca was the type of woman who cared deeply about appearances, immaculate makeup, pristine nails, a curated wardrobe, and deeply resentful of anything that disrupted the image of the perfect home she insisted she deserved. She had grown up neglected, raised in a household where she learned early that power was the only language adults listened to. That belief had calcified into cruelty over the years, and now, faced with a stepchild she never wanted, her bitterness came out in violent bursts. "If you scream again," she hissed, raising the belt, "I swear—" But the threat was cut short by another scream, this one not Lily's. It came from farther away, carried by wind. Across the street, walking slowly with a leash in hand, Sergeant Marcus Washington stopped mid-step. Marcus, known as Thunder back in his Marine unit, was a man whose very appearance made strangers instinctively straighten their backs. 36 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with thick black hair cropped short, a square jaw marked by faint stubble, and a thin scar running across his right cheek from a shrapnel incident years earlier. His skin, a warm brown tone, contrasted against the swirling snowflakes catching in his eyebrows and beard. His olive-green winter Marine jacket fit snugly against his muscular build, the embroidered name patch, Washington, faint under the frost collecting on the fabric. His personality, forged over years of deployments, had become a mixture of quiet intensity and unwavering responsibility. Thunder was the kind of man who analyzed every sound, every shadow, every expression on a stranger's face, a habit born from surviving ambushes in desert towns where one missed detail could kill a squad mate. And yet, behind the war-hardened exterior was someone burdened by loyalty, someone who carried his promises like armor. At his side padded Ranger, his 5-year-old German Shepherd canine partner. Ranger was large for his breed, amber-colored fur, thick and dense, snow collecting lightly on his back as he walked. His ears were erect, alert to every sound, and his intelligent amber eyes scanned the environment with disciplined precision. Ranger had been trained for search and rescue as well as emotional support tasks, and though he had the power and force of a working dog, his nature was gentle, especially with children. Ranger froze first. His ears snapped forward, nose lifting, body tensing. Marcus instantly recognized the shift. The dog's instincts were rarely wrong. Ranger took 2 steps toward the direction of the scream, looked back at Marcus, then let out a low, troubled whine. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Another scream pierced the wind, Lily's scream. This time sharper, more desperate. Marcus didn't hesitate. He tightened the grip on Ranger's leash and sprinted down the street, boots crunching hard against fresh snow. His breath fell in rhythmic bursts, training kicking in, heart pounding with a sense of dread he hadn't felt since his last deployment. He didn't know who was screaming yet, but every instinct in his battle-honed body told him, a child, and not just frightened, hurt. As he approached the gray house, Ranger pulled harder, muscles tensed like a coiled spring. Marcus rounded the corner to the backyard and froze. Lily knelt in the snow, trembling, shoulders bleeding from raw welts. Rebecca raised her belt again. Marcus's vision blurred for a split second from the surge of rage, not the uncontrolled kind, but the type that made him deadly focused. He stepped forward, his voice dropping into the same deep commanding register he used during raids. "Hit her again," he said, his tone low and icy. "I dare you." Rebecca spun around, startled. The belt slipped slightly in her grip. "Who the hell are you, she snapped, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her false bravado. Marcus didn't answer. Ranger growled, stepping in front of Lily, positioning his body protectively between the child and her attacker. Seeing Ranger, a fully trained canine with a muscular build, frost on his snout, and eyes glowing with threat, Rebecca stumbled back instinctively. Marcus scanned Lily quickly, pale, shivering, bruised, and staring at him with a kind of desperate hope no child should ever have. And then he recognized her. Because he had seen that face, smaller, smiling, in a photograph clutched by a dying comrade. Years ago, Staff Sergeant Diego Martinez, Marcus's closest friend, had shown him that very picture during a quiet moment overseas. Diego was a warm-hearted, loud-laughing Marine whose wide grin masked the burdens he carried. He had been proud, achingly proud of the baby girl waiting for him back home. But Diego never made it back. His death, officially recorded as an accidental training incident, had left Marcus shattered, burying grief deep under layers of discipline. After the funeral, Marcus had received an email Diego had written weeks earlier but never sent. "If anything ever happens to me, and if something ever goes wrong with Lily, I trust you more than anyone. Please look after her if she ever needs help." Marcus had tried to convince himself Diego's worries were unfounded. Until now. Until this moment. Until this Christmas Eve under falling snow. His chest tightened. The guilt hit him like a punch. Because he had promised Diego, even silently within his own heart, that he would always protect Lily. And yet here she was, beaten, freezing, alone. "Ranger, stay," Marcus ordered softly. The dog stood guard beside Lily, posture rigid. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. Rebecca panicked, shouting excuses, blaming Lily, claiming it was discipline, but her voice faded behind the ringing in Marcus's ears. All he saw was the little girl Diego had loved more than life itself. All he felt was the crushing weight of a promise resurrecting itself in the most brutal way. When the police arrived minutes later, Lily tried to stand but collapsed forward into the snow. Marcus lunged, catching her small, freezing body. Her head rested weakly against his shoulder. Her voice was barely a whisper. You know my name?" Marcus swallowed hard, throat tight. "Yeah, kid," he murmured, his voice softer than it had been in years. "I know who you are." As the snow fell harder, covering the yard in white, he realized one truth that shook him. He wasn't going to let her go. Not now. Not ever. But just as he lifted Lily into his arms, Ranger snapped his head toward the dark alley beside the house, growling with sudden intensity. Someone was moving in the shadows, watching them. Snow hammered the windshield of the ambulance as it sped through the near-empty Christmas Eve streets, the siren echoing faintly against dark buildings draped in holiday lights. Inside, the warmth was thin, hardly comforting. Lily Martinez, small and trembling beneath a silver thermal blanket, lay on the stretcher with her eyes half open, her breath sharp and shallow. Her messy chestnut hair stuck to her forehead from sweat and melting snow, and streaks of dried tears marked her pale cheeks. She looked impossibly fragile under the fluorescent ambulance lights, as if the wrong breath of air could scatter her like snowflakes. Sergeant Marcus Thunder Washington sat beside her, his large frame cramped against the wall of the ambulance, hands clenched tightly on his knees. His Marine Corps winter jacket was still dusted with snow, his square jaw locked, eyes burning with a mixture of fear and self-blame. Ranger, his amber-furred German Shepherd K9 partner, rode up front with the EMTs, separated only by a thin door, but Marcus could hear the dog pacing anxiously. Ranger disliked being away from Lily, even for minutes. Marcus understood the feeling. Across from him sat EMT Sarah Delgado, a woman in her early 40s with warm brown skin, short black curls tucked under her cap, and soft eyes that carried years of exhaustion from the things she had seen on night shifts. Sarah had the calm, steady hands of someone who had held dying people and terrified children alike. Her voice was low, soothing, shaped by the empathy she'd learned from being raised in a crowded household where she was the eldest of 6 siblings, always the caretaker. She checked Lily's vitals again, her eyebrows pulling together. "She's hypothermic," Sarah murmured, placing a gloved hand on Lily's forehead. "Body temp's low, looks like multiple stages of bruising. Some of these are months old." Her jaw tightened, a flash of anger breaking through her composed demeanor. "I've seen too many like this." Marcus stared at Lily's tiny form. "I should have checked sooner," he muttered under his breath, guilt gnawing at him. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and firmness. "You got her out. That's what matters tonight." But Marcus didn't answer. Because in his mind played the image of Diego's smiling face, the email he'd received too late, and Lily's wide, terrified eyes moments earlier. The ambulance pushed through the hospital bay. As soon as the doors opened, the cold rushed in again, biting Marcus's skin. Ranger barked from the front, claws scraping as he jumped down, then hurried to Marcus's side the moment the patient doors opened. The dog pressed against his leg protectively as Lily was wheeled inside. The emergency department was surprisingly quiet for Christmas Eve. Only a few tired nurses manned the front desk, their red Santa hats drooping slightly, their faces showing the combined weight of holiday, loneliness, and medical fatigue. A nurse approached, Kimberly Harris, a petite woman in her late 20s with curly red hair tied into a festive green ribbon. Her freckles softened her features, but her sharp brown eyes revealed an efficient, no-nonsense personality formed by growing up with 2 paramedic parents. Kimberly quickly lifted the blanket covering Lily and inhaled sharply. "God, these marks." Sarah stepped in front of Marcus gently. "Help us get her warm, start fluids, and page Dr. Shah." They moved Lily into a warm room, attaching monitors and wrapping her in heated blankets. Ranger sat at the door, ears high, watching every move with laser focus. Marcus stood stiffly in the corner, his big hands hanging uselessly by his sides. Combat he understood, field triage he knew. But watching a child, this child, hurt in ways that weren't caused by war, made his breath feel foreign in his lungs. Minutes stretched. Doctors came and went. Words like acute bruising, healing fractures, severe malnutrition, and psychological trauma floated through the air like shards of glass. Then, gently, Lily's eyelashes fluttered. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused at first, but gradually the world sharpened into shapes. She turned her head slightly, searching. Her gaze found Marcus. Her small voice cracked with cold and fear. "You didn't leave." Marcus swallowed hard, stepping to her bedside. "Not going anywhere, kid." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, surprising Marcus with their quiet intensity. She lifted a trembling hand an inch off the blanket before it fell weakly. "Please, don't take me back home." His throat tightened. "I won't." But Lily wasn't done. Her voice, a tiny, brittle whisper, carried a hopelessness no child should ever know. "On Christmas, everyone has a home. I don't want to go back there. Please." The plea broke something inside him. If guilt had been a crack before, it now split open into fierce determination. Before Marcus could respond, the door pushed open. CPS worker Dana Cooper entered, mid-30s, medium height, long dark hair in a loose braid, and tired gray eyes behind thin glasses. Dana's posture was straight and proper, but the fatigue carved into her features hinted at the decades she'd spent dealing with impossible cases. Her wool coat was wet with melted snow, and her hands clutched a clipboard filled with forms. She was the kind of person who never gave up on a child, no matter the system's failures. She approached carefully, noting Lily's trembling. "Sergeant Washington, I'm Dana. I was called in for emergency protective review." Her voice was soft but professional, shaped by years of needing to be both caring and unshakable. Marcus stepped forward. "I want temporary custody granted to me tonight." Dana blinked. She had expected arguments, half-truths, denial from the abuser, not a Marine demanding guardianship. "You're her family?" "Her father was my brother in arms," Marcus said quietly. "Before he died, he asked me to look after her if anything ever happened. I failed him once. I won't fail him again." Dana studied him. The broad shoulders, the disciplined posture, the scar on his cheek, the way Ranger stood beside him like a second heartbeat. She had dealt with problematic guardians before, but Marcus radiated something she rarely saw: conviction without ego. She reviewed the doctor's notes, brows tightening. Given her condition, she is not returning to that home tonight. She looked up at Marcus. "But temporary custody requires placement stability. Do you have a safe home environment?" Marcus nodded. "My wife and I are ready. And Ranger, he's trained to support children in trauma." Dana's gaze fell on Ranger. The dog met her eyes calmly, tail still, posture steady. After a moment, she nodded. "Then we'll evaluate." Hours passed. Forms were filled, policies were checked, conditions reviewed. Ranger stayed by Lily's bed, occasionally nudging her hand, earning faint, grateful sighs from the child. Marcus answered every question with clarity, honesty, and the steady tone of a man who had nothing to hide and everything to protect. Finally, just before dawn, Dana returned with a folder in hand. Her expression softened. "Sergeant Washington, temporary guardianship is approved." Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Lily, half awake again, heard the words. Her lips curved into the smallest, most fragile smile. "Can I go with you tonight?" Marcus felt a lump in his throat. "Yeah, kiddo. You're coming home with me." Dana stepped aside to let him lift Lily gently. The girl curled instinctively into his chest, burying her face into the warmth of his jacket. Ranger rose and walked beside them, matching Marcus's pace. Snow was still falling outside, soft now, flakes drifting like tiny stars. It was Christmas morning, and for the first time in her life, Lily was leaving a place of pain and being carried toward a home where she might finally be safe. But as the hospital doors slid open, a cold gust swept through, and Ranger suddenly locked his gaze on something across the parking lot. His ears snapped forward. A deep growl rumbled in his chest. Someone was out there, watching them, waiting. The morning of Christmas Day arrived pale and cold, with a gray sun rising behind heavy clouds and a thin sheet of ice clinging to every window of the Phoenix courthouse. Marcus Thunder Washington stood outside the entrance, holding Lily gently in his arms, her small body wrapped in a thick navy coat borrowed from the hospital. Snowflakes drifted lazily around them, the rare Arizona snowfall giving the city an unfamiliar quiet. Ranger walked at Marcus's heel, his amber fur gleaming faintly under the weak daylight, ears constantly shifting as he scanned the parking lot for the presence he had sensed earlier. Lily's head rested against Marcus's shoulder, eyes half open, exhaustion still clinging to her like a second skin. She clutched the fabric of his jacket lightly, as if afraid he might let go. Every time the wind blew too cold, Marcus adjusted his hold to shield her, feeling a protective instinct he could no longer deny. She was beginning to trust him, and he knew trust from a child like Lily wasn't given. It was earned through safety, warmth, and presence, things she had been denied for far too long. Inside the courthouse, decorated with fading holiday garlands and a small artificial Christmas tree leaning slightly in the corner, CPS worker Dana Cooper hurried up to them. Her dark braid was dusted with snow, and her glasses fogged slightly from the temperature change, but her voice remained steady. "Court starting in a few minutes. The judge agreed to move it to this morning due to the severity of the situation." She offered Lily a small, encouraging smile. "You're very brave for coming today." Lily tightened her grip on Marcus's jacket but nodded faintly. As they moved down the hallway, Marcus spotted Rebecca Carter standing rigidly near the courtroom doors. She wore a thick white coat with fur trim, hair pulled into an immaculate bun, and heavy makeup that seemed almost out of place given the seriousness of the moment. But what stood out most was her expression, icy suspicion mixed with contempt. Beside her stood attorney Paul Reiner, a middle-aged man with a wiry frame, thinning blonde hair slicked back, and sharp, fox-like features. His gray suit was perfectly pressed, and his blue tie matched the cold glint in his eyes. Paul was known for defending hopeless cases with aggressive tactics, a personality shaped by years of trying to prove himself after being dismissed as too soft early in his career. That criticism reshaped him into someone who fought ruthlessly, even when morally questionable. He looked Marcus up and down before smirking. "Bringing a dog into court? That's unconventional, Sergeant." Marcus didn't react to the taunt. "He stays with the girl." Ranger growled softly, and Paul quickly stepped back. The bailiff, a sturdy man named Officer Raymond Holt, approached. Raymond was in his 50s, tall with a weathered face, a thick mustache, and kind brown eyes that showed decades of working with frightened victims. He glanced at Lily, then at Ranger. "As long as he's trained, he can remain as emotional support. Seen that dog's papers." His deep voice held understanding, not judgment. Inside the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Whitmore took her seat. A woman in her early 60s, she had steel gray hair cut into a precise bob, pale skin with faint age lines, and intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing. Her reputation for fairness was matched equally by her intolerance for cruelty, shaped by her childhood in foster care after losing both parents. She carried the pain of those years quietly, using it to guide her decisions. "Court is now in session for custody emergency review," she announced, her voice calm yet commanding. Lily sat beside Marcus at the small table reserved for guardians. Ranger lay at her feet, body curled protectively around her legs. Marcus sat upright, jaw tense, hands clasped on the table. Lily leaned into his arm, trembling whenever Rebecca shifted or stared too long. Rebecca's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we maintain that Ms. Carter's actions were taken out of parental frustration. Lily can be difficult, strong-willed." Marcus felt Lily flinch at the words. He placed a gentle hand on her back, grounding her. Judge Whitmore's eyes sharpened. "The medical report states this child has bruises at different stages of healing, cracked ribs, untreated injuries, and signs of chronic malnutrition. Are you suggesting this is normal discipline?" Rebecca rose abruptly, her voice high and brittle. "She lies. The kid lies about everything. You don't know her. She pushes me. She screams." Dana Cooper stepped forward calmly. "Your Honor, CPS documented multiple complaints from neighbors about shouting and suspected domestic disturbances at the Carter residence. All were filed within the last year." Paul Reiner interjected, "Those complaints were unverified because," Dana said sharply, "the child never appeared in public. She was kept inside." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Rebecca's face twisted. "Well, maybe she deserved to be kept inside. She kept ruining things, breaking things." Judge Whitmore raised a hand. "That is enough, Ms. Carter." Her voice was a blade of quiet authority. Then came the moment Lily had been dreading. Judge Whitmore looked down gently. "Lily, sweetheart, I need to ask you something. Only if you feel safe. Can you tell me what happened?" Lily's breath shook. Marcus bent closer. "I'm right here," he whispered. Ranger pressed his warm body against her legs. Slowly, Lily lifted her head. Her voice was so fragile the judge leaned forward to hear. She hit me a lot. Not just yesterday, and she told me not to say anything." Tears blurred her vision, and she pressed a hand against Marcus's sleeve. "I didn't do anything wrong. I promise I didn't." The courtroom held its breath. Rebecca slammed her hand on the table. "You little—" Judge Whitmore's gavel crashed down. "Sit down, Ms. Carter." But Rebecca was unraveling. Her cold composure dissolved into rage. "She deserved it. She never listened. I should have hit her harder last night." Gasps erupted. Even Paul Reiner stepped away from his client as though her fury were contagious. Judge Whitmore's face hardened. No anger, just absolute certainty. Given your statement, the evidence presented, and the child's testimony, this court rules immediately. Custody is revoked permanently." Rebecca froze, shock draining the color from her face. The judge continued, voice unwavering. "Emergency guardianship is transferred to Sergeant Marcus Washington, effective today." Lily burst into tears, not of fear, but release, pure and overwhelming. She threw her arms around Marcus's chest. He wrapped his arms around her, his own eyes burning, holding her as if he could shield her from every nightmare she'd endured. Ranger nudged her shoulder, whining softly, licking her small hand. For the first time, Lily allowed herself to believe she was safe. It felt like being born again, on Christmas morning, in a courtroom filled with strangers, but safe. Finally safe. Yet as they walked out of the courtroom, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling creeping through his spine. Ranger kept glancing toward the hallway windows, ears high, muscles tense. Someone had been watching the hospital, and someone might be watching now, but whoever it was, they were hiding. And hiding meant danger Marcus wasn't ready to name yet. Snow fell steadily over Phoenix that evening, a rare winter curtain that softened the city's edges and muted the Christmas Day noise that slowly faded into night. The Washington home glowed with warm yellow light through the frosted windows, a sharp contrast to the world Lily had come from. Inside, Marcus moved quietly through the living room with Lily resting on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket decorated with cartoon snowmen. Ranger lay curled beside her, tail resting lightly over her legs like a protective guardrail, amber eyes flicking toward every sound outside. The house itself reflected the life Marcus had built, a life structured, calm, and safe. A decorated Christmas tree glowed in the corner, its handmade ornaments, many painted by Marines' children during base holiday events, shimmering in the lights. The scent of pine mixed with the faint smell of hot chocolate from the kitchen. Lily watched the lights, small and quiet, as if trying to believe beauty could exist without consequences. Marcus sat in a chair nearby, exhaustion pulling at every muscle, but he didn't let his guard down. He had spent hours since the hearing on edge, replaying Ranger's growls at the hospital, that shadowy figure in the parking lot. Something wasn't adding up, and he knew from war experience that instincts, especially canine instincts, never lied. Just as he stood to check the windows again, the doorbell rang. Ranger shot upright instantly, hackles rising. Marcus placed a steadying hand on the dog's back and approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, he saw two individuals standing on the porch, snow gathering on their coats. He opened the door slowly. Sergeant Washington? Standing in front of him was FBI Special Agent Lauren Reyes, a woman in her late 30s, tall and athletic with sharp cheekbones, long dark hair pulled into a low ponytail, and deep brown eyes made even keener by a life spent dissecting human lies. Her tan skin showed faint freckles across her nose, and her expression, though serious, held genuine concern. Lauren's posture radiated confidence but not arrogance, a product of surviving a difficult upbringing in a dangerous neighborhood where she learned early that strength meant protection, not cruelty. Beside her stood Special Agent Benjamin Clark, mid-40s, broad-shouldered with a thick brown beard peppered with gray, square-framed glasses and a calm demeanor that contrasted with his intimidating presence. His pale skin and rugged features made him look like someone carved from stone, but his gentle, steady eyes suggested deep empathy. Ben was known within the Bureau for his patience and ability to see patterns others missed, a trait shaped by losing his younger sister to domestic abuse years earlier, something that pushed him into law enforcement. Marcus stepped aside. "Come in." Lauren nodded and entered, brushing snow from her coat. Ben followed, taking in the room with a sweep of his eyes, assessing exits, lines of sight, threats, standard FBI instinct. Lily shrank slightly against the couch, but Ranger moved closer to her, positioning himself like a shield. Lauren softened her expression immediately. "Hi, Lily. I'm Agent Lauren. We're here to help you." Ben gave a gentle wave, his deep voice warm. "We're on your side, kiddo." Lily didn't speak, but she shifted closer to Ranger, trusting his judgment. Marcus crossed his arms. "This isn't just about the custody case." Lauren exchanged a look with Ben before answering. "We need to talk about Staff Sergeant Diego Martinez, your friend." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "His accident?" Ben shook his head. We don't believe it was an accident anymore." Those words sliced through the room like an icy wind. Lauren stepped forward. "After your report last night and CPS's emergency documentation, we reviewed Diego's file and found anomalies. Reports that should have been cross-examined were closed too quickly. Witness statements were incomplete. Some signatures were forged." Marcus's jaw tightened. It was the nightmare he feared but never allowed himself to voice. "You're saying he was killed?" Lauren nodded. "We're saying there's strong evidence he might have been." Lily's small voice cracked gently. "My dad?" Marcus crouched beside her. "We'll find out the truth, Lily." Ben continued, careful and measured. "There's something else. Last night, hospital security footage caught someone watching your ambulance leave. That same person followed your car to this neighborhood before disappearing, and that same individual appeared in older footage connected to Diego's base." The hairs on Marcus's arms rose. Ranger growled low. Lauren cleared her throat. "We've been tracking a small network operating under the guise of a military widows support group. Several women connected to the group have had spouses die under suspicious circumstances, followed by unusually large insurance payouts." Ben added, "And the worst part? Evidence suggests child abuse patterns across multiple families connected to these women." The air in the room turned heavy. Lily trembled, but Ranger's warm body remained pressed against her. Lauren's voice softened as she looked at the child. "Lily, we think your stepmother, Rebecca Carter, may have been involved in something much bigger than a custody case." Marcus exhaled slowly, fury burning under his skin. "You're telling me she killed Diego?" Ben met his eyes. "We believe she wasn't working alone, but yes, she likely participated." For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the soft hum of the heater. Marcus stared at the Christmas lights, suddenly feeling their warmth fade. He remembered Diego's laugh, the way he talked about Lily, the pride in his voice, the email, the promise. All of it slammed into him with renewed force. Lauren placed a file on the table. "With your permission, we need Ranger's help." Marcus blinked. "Ranger?" Ben knelt carefully to the dog's level. "Canines can trace scents even years later if preserved on objects. We have access to Diego's stored belongings from the base." Ranger sniffed Ben's hand, then looked up at Marcus, ears high, tail stiff. "Ready." Marcus nodded once. "Do it." The following hours blurred into interviews, photographs, paperwork, and small moments where Lily dozed against Marcus's side, occasionally waking with frightened gasps. Ranger never left her, not once. By late evening, Lauren and Ben prepared to leave. Lauren's voice held a mix of reassurance and gravity. "We'll be back soon. Tonight was just the beginning." Ben added, "And Sergeant, thank you. Kids like Lily rarely get someone willing to fight for them this hard." After they left, Marcus closed the door slowly, staring through the frosted window at the snowy street. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. "Are they going to hurt us?" Marcus knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, I won't let them." Her little chin quivered. "Will Dad get justice?" Marcus swallowed, his voice firm despite the ache in his chest. "I promise you, Lily, he will." Outside, Christmas lights flickered across snow-covered lawns. Inside, warmth returned, slowly, quietly, like a breath of hope. Lily leaned her head against Marcus, whispering, "Thank you for helping me." Marcus wrapped his arms around her gently, feeling the weight of both past and future settling onto his shoulders. "You're not alone anymore." That Christmas night, as Ranger curled beside them and snow whispered against the windows, Marcus made a vow as unbreakable as the one he made to Diego years ago. And days later, when FBI warrants were executed, when Rebecca and her accomplices were arrested, when charges stacked high and justice thundered down, Marcus held Lily close as the news arrived. Rebecca Carter received 4 life sentences. Lily's small face pressed against his chest, relief shaking her little body. "Dad got justice," she whispered. Marcus nodded, voice low and full of quiet triumph. Yes, he did. Christmas had finally given Lily something no one had given her before: safety, truth, and the beginning of healing. Snow returned to Phoenix 1 year later. softer and calmer than the stormy nights that had once marked Lily's life. It fell in delicate flakes across the Washington home, landing on rooftops, layering the lawn like powdered sugar and catching the glow of warm lights shining from every window. The house looked peaceful, alive, and inside it, laughter, warmth, and the scent of cinnamon drifted softly through the air. Lily Martinez, now 8, stood in the living room wearing a soft cream sweater decorated with tiny snowflakes. Her chestnut-brown hair, once messy and lifeless, now reached her shoulders in gentle curls, healthy and shiny. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, her posture braver, her eyes brighter. She still carried shadows deep in her mind, but therapy, stability, and love had slowly filled the cracks left by years of fear. She had begun to speak louder, laugh easier, and dream without guilt. Ranger, now 6 years old, lay on the rug beside the fireplace, larger and stronger than the year before. His amber fur shimmered in the firelight, and despite his aging into a more mature, steadier dog, his eyes remained gentle, especially when watching Lily. He followed her everywhere, a constant guardian. Lily often joked he was her shadow with fur. Marcus Thunder Washington stood near the Christmas tree, arranging a few final ornaments. At 37, he carried himself with the same disciplined confidence he always had, but something had softened in him this past year, something unmistakably paternal. His once sharply etched jaw now carried a faint smile line he didn't have before. His deep brown eyes, hardened by years of combat, glowed warmer when looking at Lily. He wasn't just her protector now. He was home. Footsteps sounded from the kitchen, and Maria Washington, Marcus's wife, entered with a tray of fresh cookies. Maria was in her mid-30s, with warm olive skin, soft brown hair tied in a loose bun, and gentle hazel eyes that communicated her kindness before she even spoke. A pediatric nurse, she carried a nurturing presence that filled the room effortlessly. She had become a quiet anchor for Lily, someone who taught her how to braid hair, bake holiday cookies, and sleep without fear. "Christmas cookies are ready," Maria said softly, setting the tray down. Lily's eyes lit up with excitement, but before she could run over, the doorbell rang. Her breath caught. Even after a year of healing, unexpected knocks still froze her momentarily. Ranger stood up immediately, stepping in front of her protectively. Marcus placed a gentle hand on Lily's back. "It's okay, kiddo. It's Christmas. Good things happen today." He walked to the door and peered through the glass. Standing outside, brushing snow off his coat, was Judge Eleanor Whitmore, the same judge who once gave Lily a second chance at life. She wore a long charcoal coat over a burgundy scarf, her steel-gray hair neatly brushed, her solid cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Her presence was authoritative yet warm, one that carried no threat. Marcus smiled as he opened the door. "Judge Whitmore, come in." Eleanor stepped inside, bringing with her the faint scent of peppermint and winter air. She carried a leather folder in one hand, her dark eyes softening when she saw Lily's face peeking from behind Ranger. "Hello, Lily," she said, kneeling slightly so she could speak eye level. "You've grown. I almost didn't recognize you." Lily stepped forward shyly, her voice stronger now. "Thank you for helping me last year." Eleanor's smile deepened, though a hint of melancholy flickered through her expression, an echo of her own childhood spent longing for someone who would fight for her. "You did the hardest part, dear. You survived." Marcus motioned her to the living room. The judge sat down, smoothing her coat across her lap. Ranger lay close by, quietly watching. Maria brought her hot tea, and Eleanor accepted it with a grateful nod. After a moment of calm conversation, she opened the folder. Inside lay several forms, neatly clipped together, stamped, signed, finalized. Eleanor looked at Marcus and Maria with a soft seriousness. "All checks are completed, every requirement met. Background, home study, interviews, therapy records. Everything is in perfect order." Lily looked around nervously. Ranger nuzzled her hand, grounding her. Eleanor turned to Lily and smiled. "Sweetheart, today I'm here for something special, and I wanted to bring it myself." She handed Lily the final page, an official court document, her new birth certificate. The name printed on it read, Lily Martinez Washington. Lily blinked several times, tears gathering but not yet falling. That's my name?" Eleanor nodded. If you want it to be. Lily's small fingers traced the letters. Marcus stepped closer, heart thudding heavily. He crouched beside her. You don't have to say yes, he said gently. Only if you want to. Lily choked on a small sound, half laugh, half sob. I wanted this for so long, I just didn't know if I was allowed. Marcus wrapped her into his arms, lifting her off the ground as she clung tightly around his neck. Maria joined them, placing a tender hand on Lily's back. Ranger barked once happily, tail thumping against the carpet. Judge Whitmore stood, watching the sight with misty eyes. Then it's official, she said warmly. Congratulations, all of you. Before leaving, the judge reached into her coat and handed Lily a small stocking, hand-knitted, deep red with her name embroidered in white thread. A gift, she said. Every child deserves to hang their own stocking at Christmas. Lily hugged her fiercely. Thank you. After the judge left, Lily walked to the fireplace quietly, slowly, almost reverently. The fire crackled gently, filling the room with orange glow. Marcus had hung Diego's old Marine Corps stocking, a deep blue one with a golden chevron, beside his own. Lily stood on her toes and hung her stocking right next to her father's. Dad, she whispered softly to the embroidered name, Con on Roy. Marcus knelt beside her, his big hand resting gently on her back. Snow drifted outside the window, catching the light like falling stars. Lily leaned her head against his shoulder. Con duxinralan tu haivo jangsin, nyo ba va ranger. Marcus's throat tightened. He pulled her into a full embrace, his voice deep and warm. Merry Christmas, kiddo. Lily smiled through tears. Let's go home. And surrounded by falling snow, soft lights, and the warmth of the family she chose, and who chose her, Lily finally stepped into the one thing she had always deserved, a home, a father, a future. Sometimes the miracles God sends are not angels wrapped in light, but ordinary people placed in our path at the exact moment we need them most. Lily's story reminds us that even in the darkest nights, a single act of courage, kindness, or love can become the miracle someone has been praying for. As you go back to your everyday life, remember this. You may never know whose life you are touching, whose silent prayer you might be answering, or whose hope you help restore just by showing compassion. If this story moved you, please share it so others can feel its message. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. May God bless you, protect your home, and place His light upon your path today and always.